A ship appeared on the horizon, slowly floating closer. Her movements erratic, her sails set in an odd manner. Nobody could be seen on deck. Numerous outgoing signals were not answered. As the vessel drew closer, a name could finally be established by the engraving on her stern. This was the Mary Celeste, and all the people on board had mysteriously and inexplicably vanished. Built in Spencer's Island, Nova Scotia, the Mary Celeste was first launched under British registration as Amazon on May 18, 1861, but transferred to American ownership and registration in December 1868 and acquired the new name. From then, she sailed uneventfully until 1872. Registered as a merchant brigantine, she was 103 feet in length and 25.7 feet in width, with a depth of 16.2 feet and a gross tonnage of 282.28. Captain Benjamin Briggs married his first cousin, Sarah Elizabeth Cobb, and had 2 children. The youngest, infant Sophia Matilda, who was born in October 1870, accompanied him on this voyage. The rest of the crew was chosen with great care by Captain Briggs. 7 in total, he chose those only with previous sailing experience, and being peaceable and first-class sailors. On October 20th, 1872, Captain Briggs arrived at Pier 50 on the East River in New York City, where he supervised the loading of the ship's cargo of 1,701 barrels of alcohol. He would stay there a week, awaiting the arrival of his wife and daughter. On Sunday, November 3rd, 1872, Briggs wrote to his mother of his intention to leave on Tuesday. On the morning of Tuesday, November 5th, Briggs left Pier 50 and moved into the New York harbor. On this day, he noticed the weather was uncertain and decided on waiting for better conditions, anchoring the ship just off Staten Island. 2 days later, on Thursday, December 5th, 1872, the Mary Celeste left the harbor and entered the Atlantic. Dei Gratia was a Canadian brigantine that lay nearby in Hoboken, New Jersey, destined for Genoa via Gibraltar. On November 15, 1872, they departed for Gibraltar, following the same general route of the Mary Celeste, who had departed 8 days prior. Dei Gratia had reached a position midway between the Azores and the coast of Portugal at about 1 p.m. on Thursday, December 5, 1872. And Captain Morehouse appeared on deck after a helmsman reported a vessel about 6 miles in the distance, heading unsteadily towards them. Captain Morehouse could see nobody on deck, and he received no reply to his signals, so he instructed his first and second mates in a ship's boat to investigate. They climbed aboard. The ship was deserted. Her sails were in poor condition and partly set, with some missing altogether, and the rigging damaged. The main hatch cover, however, was secure, but the fore and lazarette hatches were open, with the covers laying beside them on the deck. The ship's single lifeboat was missing, while the binnacle that housed the ship's compass had shifted from its place and the glass cover broken. They found 3.5 feet of water in the hold, which was a significant amount but not alarming. They then checked the ship's daily log in the mate's cabin. The final entry was dated November 25th at 800 hours, 9 days earlier, November 16th, where it recorded the Mary Celeste's position off Santa Maria Island in Azores. This was nearly 400 nautical miles from the place Dei Gratia encountered her. The first mate noted that while the cabin interiors were wet and untidy from water that had found its way in during the days at sea, they were otherwise in reasonable order. When investigating Captain Briggs's cabin, they identified that most of the ship's papers were missing, along with the captain's navigation instruments, and that his personal items were scattered around, with a sheathed sword stowed away under the bed. Galley equipment were neatly stored away, with no food prepared or under preparation, but there were ample provisions in storage. Overall, there were no obvious signs of fire or violence. Evidence clearly indicated that only an orderly departure from the ship transpired, by means of the missing lifeboat. First and second mate reported this to Captain Morehouse, who made the decision to bring the derelict Mary Celeste to the nearest shore, which was 600 nautical miles away in Gibraltar. Captain Morehouse separated his crew of 8 between the two vessels, and while the weather was relatively calm on their way to harbour, each ship was severely undercrewed and they reached Gibraltar on December 12th, 7 days after they had first encountered the Mary Celeste. On reaching Gibraltar, the Mary Celeste was immediately impounded to prepare for salvage hearings. The salvage court hearings began in Gibraltar on December 17, 1872. Testimonies made by the first and second mate of Dei Gratia convinced the Attorney General of Gibraltar, Frederick Solly Flood, that a crime had been committed. He comments, "The inference is that there has been foul play somewhere, and that alcohol is at the bottom of it." On December 23rd, Flood ordered an examination of the Mary Celeste, which was conducted by a surveyor with assistance of a diver. The surveyor noted cuts on each side of the bow, caused, he thought, by a sharp instrument, and possibly traces of blood found on the captain's sword. He reported that the ship did not appear to have been struck by bad, heavy weather, and the diver's report on the hull concluded that the ship had not been involved in a collision or run aground. A further investigation was conducted by Royal Naval captains, where they endorsed the surveyor's opinion that the cuts on the bow had been caused deliberately. Further investigation had them note stains on one of the ship's rails, which could possibly be blood, together with a deep mark, caused possibly by an axe. On January 22, 1873, Flood sent the report to the Board of Trade in London, adding his own conclusion that the crew had got at the alcohol and murdered the Briggs family and the ship's officers in a drunken frenzy. They had cut the bows to simulate a collision and then fled in the yawl to suffer an unknown fate. James Winchester arrived in Gibraltar on January 15th to inquire when Mary Celeste might be released to deliver a cargo. Flood demanded $15,000, money Winchester did not have. Winchester became aware that Flood thought he might have deliberately engaged a crew that would kill Captain Briggs and his officers as part of some conspiracy. Flood's theories of mutiny and murder received significant setbacks when scientific analysis of the stains found on the sword and elsewhere on the ship showed that they were not blood. With nothing concrete to support his suspicions, Flood reluctantly released Mary Celeste from the court's jurisdiction on February 25th. 2 weeks later, with a locally raised crew, she left Gibraltar for Genoa. The evidence in Gibraltar failed to support Flood's theories of murder and conspiracy, yet suspicion lingered of foul play. Flood and some newspaper reports briefly suspected insurance fraud on the part of Winchester on the basis that Mary Celeste had been heavily overinsured. Winchester was able to refute these allegations and no inquiry was ever conducted. In 1931, an article in the Quarterly Review suggested that Morehouse could have lain in wait for Mary Celeste, then lured Briggs and his crew above Dei Gratia and killed them there. This theory is highly unlikely as it ignores the fact that Dei Gratia was the slowest ship. She left New York 8 days after Mary Celeste and would not have caught Mary Celeste before she reached Gibraltar. Another suggested event was an attack by Riffian pirates who were active off the coast of Morocco in the 1870s. However, if this was the case, the pirates would have looted the ship, yet the personal possessions of captain and crew were left undisturbed, some of significant value. Several times in the ship's log there is mention of ominous rumbling and small explosions from the hold. Cargoes of alcohol naturally give off explosive gas, and these sounds described are quite common. He supposes that one day there was a more intense explosion and a sailor ventured below deck with a light or lit cigar, which set off the accumulated fumes, causing an explosion violent enough to blow off the top covering on the hatch. A theory also mentioned was of a natural phenomena, called a waterspout, that could have swept everyone overboard. This could also explain the water found in the cabins and the hold. Some historians, and even a relative of Briggs, support the idea of an earthquake rocking the ship and causing the alcohol to leak from its barrels, prompting Briggs to abandon ship, fearing an explosion. Despite being seen as unlucky, the Mary Celeste remained in service and went through a number of owners before being acquired by a new captain. In 1885, he deliberately sailed it into a reef near Haiti as part of a plan to defraud an insurance company. When the vessel failed to sink, authorities discovered his scheme. The Mary Celeste, however, was damaged beyond repair, and it was left on the reef, where it deteriorated.